Have you ever watched a Nollywood movie that started brilliantly only to become frustrating halfway through? The problem is not the acting, it is not the camera, it's not even the budget. The problem is the script. Today, I'm exposing the screenwriting mistakes that is secretly destroying most Nollywood movies. Mistake number one, starting a movie with a premise. Most Nollywood movies have good premise. A premise is an idea, that is the story idea. A movie can have a good story idea and not be good. There is a clear difference between having a story idea and telling a story. For you to be able to tell a story, there is need for that to be driven by the story engine, or we can also call it the narrative engine. There are three components that make up the story engine: the goal, the obstacle, and the consequence. Now, let's picture this. If you have a good story idea, the story idea could be a rich man falls in love with a poor girl. That is a story idea, but it is not a story. The reason why it cannot be a story is because there is no engine in that idea. When you add an engine to it to form a story, a good story. So let's add an engine to this and then let's see what it becomes. To add an engine, it simply means there must be a goal that will be felt in the statement. So if I transform it, we will have things something like a rich man must make a choice between having family inheritance or marrying a poor girl that he's in love with. This particular statement automatically is a story. It is a story because it has a goal. The rich man has two options. It is either the goal is to possess the family inheritance or to go ahead and marry the poor girl that he is in love with. One is the goal that he must achieve in the movie. Obstacle. The family is the obstacle. There are two aspects to this obstacle. Him having the goal of acquiring the family inheritance. The girl that he's in love with is an obstacle. Him having the goal to marry the girl that he's in love with, acquiring the family inheritance becomes an obstacle. The consequence. Any option that he chooses, the goal, whichever goal that he wants to take, certainly has a consequence attached to it. If he chooses to acquire the family inheritance, it becomes a positive consequence. If he chooses to marry a poor girl that he's in love with, he acquires a negative consequence. So either way, there is goal, there is obstacle, there is consequence. That is what makes a story engine, and that is what makes a great story. Having a great story is very important, and many Nollywood movies actually skip this because their core message is often centered on passing a lesson through. A story idea can pass a lesson, but may not tell a story. When you are telling a story, you are actually focusing on something that is being achieved. The second mistake is excessive exposition. Most Nollywood movies have the character expose a whole lot that is not meant to be exposed verbally. There are different aspects of exposition. You can expose via dialogue, you can expose via actions and visual clues. But what happens in most Nollywood movies is that most expositions are done through dialogue. That's why Nollywood movies are more dialogue centered. And when a movie is dialogue-centered, it blocks the logic aspect of the brain. Nollywood movies have more of most women fans and less male fans. This is the consequence of being dialogue-centered. Excessive exposition. There are verbal ways of exposing, there is visual clue and through actions and conflicts. You can expose the whole lot through these different means. Now, let's take for instance a family gathering. Family is having a meeting and one makes a statement in the dialogue and said, "You know my brother, since our father died 5 years ago, he's trying to have a conversation with the brothers." You understand? In such conversation, you will understand that he has revealed the fact that the father is late, the father died 5 years ago. This particular exposition may not necessarily be verbal. It can still be shown without saying it. Not saying it engages the curiosity mindset. Instead of saying these things, he can simply go ahead and present what he wanted to say instead of telling us that the father died 5 years ago. The visual clue would have been used to show this thing. Let's take for instance, in this scenario, the visual clue will reveal a grave close to where the discussion is taking place. When we see that grave, we will know that yes, someone is late. It is liable to be a parent, right? Now, if we now want to show that it is the father that is late, that means if the mother is present in that meeting without the father, we can be able to figure out that actually that grave that we have seen is liable to be the father's grave. A viewer is supposed to think. As an audience, as you're watching a movie, you're supposed to be thinking along. But if there's no room for you to think along, things get boring. This is part of the reason why it is easy to predict Nollywood movies. Very easy to predict it. From the dialogue, you already know what will happen at the end. And that doesn't really sell well. Mistake number 3 is character act. There is no character act in many Nollywood movies. Character act is about character transformation. That which simply means that in a movie, if you're watching a film, it's expected that a character should be able to transform from one stage to another. A character cannot remain the same all through the movie. If initially a character is afraid at the beginning, the character is supposed to transform from being fearful to being courageous. That is transformation. There are certain conflicts, certain obstacles that have enabled the character to transform. For instance, this is mainly referring to the protagonist. The protagonist is supposed to transform. Even the antagonist also is supposed to transform. The protagonist is supposed to transform as he tries to counter the antagonist. From being fearful to being courageous, from being ignorant to being wise. These are transformation processes that a character is supposed to pass through. If a character does not pass through this transformation, it simply means there is something wrong. And I've seen this in so many Nollywood movies. These things need to be looked into and corrected in the script before we go on the stage. The fourth mistake in the Nollywood screenplay involves predictable twists that often occur in most Nollywood movies. It's easy to predict the twists. A twist is supposed to be surprising, supposed to surprise the viewer. You take a dimension that the viewer least expected. Although there are clues you're supposed to drop before the twist, but you're dropping those clues in such a way that the viewer will not be able to identify those clues. But after the twist, the viewer will now recognize the clue and get to understand, it will become an excitement that the viewer will encounter, having been able to merge the pre-frame event to the current frame event, being able to match it, that gives the excitement. It makes the viewer to be happy watching the movie. This is part of the things that happens in the industry. And you know that for a twist to be a good one, there are three things that makes a good twist. One is that it's supposed to surprise the viewer. Two, it's supposed to reframe the previous event. Third is that it's supposed to make sense. So working on the twist is very, very important. Mistake number 5 has to do with poor stakes. In many Nollywood movies, there is poor stake. A stake is what you stand to lose after you've taken certain decision. If the stake is high, it makes the movie more interesting because it keeps the viewer on their toes. The viewer will see the stake, and the higher the stake, the more emotional the viewer will become. And as a scriptwriter, you need to draw these emotions through your writing. When you're producing a movie with high stake, it sells your movie, your subsequent movies, because the viewer will want to experience that emotional shift in their system. The emotion, it doesn't matter whether it is positive or negative, emotion is emotion. If the stake is poor, the viewer would not care. When the stake is high, the viewer will care so much about the protagonist. Such situation is required. The stake can be, it can be life, losing the life of a loved one within the movie. It can be losing love. It can be losing reputation. But if the stake is high, it makes things more interesting. Mistake number 6 has to do with the villains we have in the movies. A villain is an antagonist. So in most Nollywood movies, you have a situation whereby I don't really understand the kind of villains that we used to have. The villains that will suddenly become evil for no reason, that kind of thing. You have a wicked uncle in the village. The wicked uncle will just kill the boy for no reason. Maybe the boy is doing well, the wicked uncle will just kill him for no reason. All this kind of thing, we see these things a lot. That's why some of us were tired of watching all those wicked uncle stuff, because it's not really holding on. So it's really important to understand what a villain is supposed to do in a movie. When you have an antagonist in a movie, that antagonist is supposed to be motivated. There's one movie that I watched, this Migration. I think it was ending of last year, early this year. It has a good antagonist, but although the ending of the antagonist was not impressive, but an antagonist is supposed to be motivated. An antagonist is supposed to do things, move from strength to strength, escalating the conflict. The conflict needs to be escalated towards the resolution before the ending. It's always very important. Place an antagonist doesn't know what it's doing, it makes it not trustworthy. Viewer will not trust the antagonist, but the viewer is supposed to trust the antagonist and not necessarily like the antagonist, but there's the kind of trust that the antagonist knows what he's doing. This is required. While the viewer pities the protagonist, supposed to also trust the antagonist, enjoy the antagonist's actions and motivations. The mistake number 7 has to do with dialogue repetition. There is this repetition that used to happen in the dialogue. What I mean by repetition is this: you're repeating the same kind of issue, not repeating word by word. No, that is not the situation here. Repeating the same kind of thing you have said before. You are referring to something, then you refer to that thing again in another way, using different statements, but you still made that same reference, which is similar to the previous one you've made. Characters used to do that a lot in Nollywood movies. I don't know, maybe of course, it's the screenwriter the screenwriters maybe he lacked words. He wanted to write more words. Since Nollywood must be dialogue rich, it's so dialogue centered. He push in more words. He wants to say more, therefore creating repetition without realizing it. Saying less is not a bad thing. There are actions, in fact, silence speaks more. The producers understand and writers understand the importance of action, conflict, visual clues. These things are the silence that speaks louder. So there's a lot of message that is involved in silence. Saying too much sometimes mess things up, because when you say too much, you tend to expose a whole lot and you tend to repeat, which is not good. Mistake number 8 has to do with weak opening. Many Nollywood movies don't have strong openings. They have weak openings. This is what an opening is like. The first scene that a viewer sees in the movie is supposed to produce something that will intrigue the viewer, followed by the next one, the next one. If a viewer sees 5 scenes, or let me say 4 scenes, and there is no intrigue, then the whole thing is flopped. There should be something that will raise the curiosity of the viewer within the first few scenes in the movie. Something must raise the curiosity of the viewer. There must be a question that drives the viewer to stay there and see where the whole thing is going. What I often see in many Nollywood movies is you have a movie starts, and even in the 10th minute of a movie, you won't really have something intriguing, nothing that raises your curiosity. You're just watching, you're just following the discussion as it's going. So we have few movies that actually gives a very strong opening that catches the audience within the very few scene sequence. Very, very important. Once you catch an audience within the opening, you have the audience till the end of the movie. That is what makes the opening very, very important. Writers are supposed to put this into consideration to ensure that when you are writing, give more time, give more energy to let's say, the first 5 scenes of the story. Let these first 5 scenes be able to raise curiosity. The mistake number 9 is rushed ending. In this ending part, it's good for a story to end well, to end in a manner that is inevitable, not necessarily convenient. What I often see in many Nollywood movies, you have within the last 10% of the entire movie, that's where you have the resolution occurring. It's not supposed to end that sharp, where you often see a situation whereby maybe a wicked uncle suddenly confess to be the one that killed so and so person, so and so person. Why is it like that? Why would the wicked uncle suddenly confess? There is supposed to be certain process that must happen within the resolution act that will produce that confession. Something cinematic must happen. 10th mistake. And this 10th one is really very strong because it has a very devastating effect. The 10th mistake is the lack of research. Writers don't used to research. I don't understand why in the industry there is one dominant genre, romance. Every producer is focused on it. Yes, it is actually moving, it's a normal thing. Romance is quite a genre, is a niche that never dies. But the problem here is that other niche needs to be exploited too. When you focus so much on this particular romance niche, it messes things up. The Nollywood industry is supposed to be for male and female, not for female mainly. It shouldn't be female dominated. We are not supposed to be having 90% of female, 10% of male. That kind of ratio. It doesn't make sense. There are so many other aspects, story aspects. Basically, these story aspects are really the ones that needs research. Anybody can write romance. Romance doesn't need research. You can sit in your house and create the whole story and it will be good. You can reframe the previous one. People will still watch it as long as it's emotional. Story aspects like crime stories, medical stories, courtroom dramas, political stories, investigation, crime is everywhere all over the country. Yet, we cannot see crime stories that involves investigation. The Nollywood industry is in the position to educate the police. The screenwriters are supposed to research deeply before writing some of these stories like crime stories, political stories. Research very deep. These are deep research story sector which that requires so much research. You research very well, then you produce a piece and it will be worth it. This kind of story sector is actually what drives male into watching Nollywood movies. But what we have is saturated romance genres, so romance movies everywhere. That's for the female folks, not for the male folks. Men don't have that interest in watching Nollywood movies because of the Nollywood producers and screenwriters excluded men. So it's very important we look into these mistakes. I'm supposed to talk about the cause and effect, the part that most writers don't really consider the cause and effect. Normally, if there is a cause, there should be an effect to that. What it means is a decision is supposed to be followed with a consequence. A new decision, a new consequence. This cause and effect is very important. This should be the 11th mistake actually. So we'll have less consideration of the cause and effect in the movies. Ignoring the cause and effect when creating a story is not ideal. It is important to consider the cause and effect, knowing fully well that an event shouldn't happen randomly. There should be a pattern. When a decision is being made, a consequence should follow it. When a new decision is being made, a new consequence should follow it. That pattern produces a very good trajectory for the movie. So, with these mistakes, I believe strongly that when being implemented, we'll have something much better. At least I've looked so deeply into having 11 mistakes being exposed. This will serve us very much, and I'll get to see you in the next one. And if you've not subscribed to my channel, please do so. You can like and share. MSN.